It was around 2:03 a.m. on November 25th, 2024. The room was suffocatingly dark, the kind of dark that feels as though it's pressing in from all sides, thick and unrelenting. I had woken up from a restless sleep and lay there, trying to will myself back to slumber. I listened to the steady hum of the fan, the only sound in the room, trying to push away the unease that clung to me. But then, just when I thought I might drift back into oblivion, I heard it. A voice. It was faint at first, a low murmur that I could barely make out over the rush of the fan. "Did you hear about the Silica ice?" The words hit me like a shock wave. I froze, my body tensing as I tried to make sense of what I had just heard. The voice sounded so much like my little brother's, familiar, comforting even, but it was off, wrong in a way that made my skin crawl. It wasn't his voice entirely. It sounded distorted somehow. As the phrase lingered in the air, an image slammed into my mind. A face. A man's face, but not like any man I had ever seen. His skin was dry, almost ashen, like he hadn't seen the sun in years. His lips were pulled into a grotesque, ear-to-ear grin that stretched unnaturally across his face. His hair was black, wet, and hung to his ears in stringy locks that dripped with a kind of dark, oily sheen. But most disturbing of all were his eyes. White, reflective and milky, like the flash of a camera on an animal's eyes. Those eyes that stared at you without blinking, with no depth, no soul behind them, just a gleaming emptiness. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My gaze flicked toward my little brother's bed across the room. He was fast asleep, tangled in his covers, unaware of anything. I felt my heart pound in my chest. There was no way he had spoken those words, and yet, there it was again, the voice, not from him. The voice returned, slow and deliberate, as if it were narrating my every thought, my every move. "He starts by knocking." Suddenly, I felt it, a faint tapping against the covers, a light but unmistakable knock, as if someone were rapping gently on the fabric of my blanket. It came from beneath me, from the edge of my bed. I instinctively pulled my knees closer to my chest and lifted the covers slightly, trying to peer out. What was it? A shadow? A trick of my tired mind? But no, there it was again, the knocking. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as I reached for the edge of the blanket, determined to look for what was causing the sound. But as I did, something shifted beneath me, something that made the knocks grow stronger, more insistent. The blanket was disturbed with force, like something or someone was pushing it from underneath. My fingers slipped from their grip, and the fabric of the blanket shifted, trapping my hands. I tried to tug it free, but it was as if the blanket had become alive, refusing to let me look out. The knocks grew louder now, almost like a pounding, not at all in rhythm, but erratic, frantic. I couldn't breathe. I felt paralyzed, caught between the nightmare I was living and the reality I knew. Desperately, I tried to regain control, to understand what was happening. The voice, the same haunting voice, spoke again. "He makes sure that they feel safe in their beds." The words cut through me like ice. What did that mean? Who was this he? And why did I feel watched? The voice made it clear now. He was not talking about my brother. No, this thing that had somehow made its way into my dream was speaking of me. The realization struck like a gut punch. I could feel it now, deep in my bones. I was the one being watched, the one who had to be kept safe, the one this thing was concerned about. A cold sweat broke out over my skin. I tried to break free from the covers, but the pressure grew stronger, more oppressive. The knocks became sharp, almost frantic, as if something was trying to break through. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All I could do was listen as the voice continued narrating every moment as though I were a character in its twisted story. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. "He watches, he waits, he ensures that you feel nothing but comfort, safety. But that's the illusion, isn't it?" I didn't want to hear it anymore. I had to wake up. I had to escape whatever this was. My mind began to race. Was this a nightmare? Was I still asleep? Could I even trust what I was experiencing? I focused on my breathing, trying to break free from the crushing pressure that had me trapped in this waking nightmare. And then, just when I thought I was going to lose my mind, it stopped. The voice faded into the dark. The knocking ceased. and for a split second, everything went silent. Relief. I convinced myself that I had broken free. I was safe. I could just go back to sleep, dismiss it as a nightmare, and never think about it again. I turned my thoughts to other things, anything to drown out the echoes of those words. I willed myself to relax, to drift back into the comforting embrace of sleep. But just as I felt my body sinking into the quiet dark again, I heard something. A voice. This time, it was not in the room with me. No, it was coming from somewhere deeper, somewhere else. The voice spoke again, soft and close, a whisper I could feel rather than hear. "You're still here. He's still watching." And then it came. The image burned into my mind once more. The face, the man with the dry skin, the grin, and the eyes. But now, I wasn't in my bed anymore. I was in the dark, alone. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, I couldn't wake up. The man was standing there, watching, his eyes gleaming with that same reflective, soulless stare. His grin widened, and then I realized with a sinking horror that I wasn't dreaming anymore. I had never woken up.